Some cars are bought, some cars are repaired, and then there are machines like this where logic stops making sense and obsession takes over. A wrecked Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport sitting in a salvage yard should have been the end of its story. A write-off, a headline, a memory of what once was a $6 million hypercar built to defy physics. But instead, it became the beginning of something nobody in their right mind would attempt. Because what happens when a team decides they are not just going to fix a Bugatti, they are going to rebuild one, without the manufacturer, without factory support, and without the safety net of knowing if it can even be done. The answer starts in a workshop in Miami, where reality and ambition are about to collide. The first thing you notice isn't the damage. It's the silence. A Bugatti, even broken, still looks expensive in a way that doesn't feel real. Carbon fiber twisted like paper. Sensors hanging like nerves exposed. Wheels that cost more than houses sitting under harsh workshop lights like they don't belong in the same world as the tools around them. And yet, here it is, not in a showroom, not on a track, but in pieces. The plan sounds simple when spoken out loud. Strip it down, diagnose it, rebuild it. But every single person in that room understands something unspoken. Nothing about this car is simple. The first scan connects like a lifeline. Diagnostic tools flicker. Codes appear. Faults stack up one after another like the car is listing everything that went wrong in the moment it died. Transmission errors. Airbag systems. Cooling failure. Electrical chaos. Misfires buried deep in a drivetrain that was never meant to be opened outside a factory floor. And somewhere in that chaos is the truth. This car didn't just crash. It collapsed. Because hypercars like this don't forgive mistakes. They multiply them. Every damaged component is not just a replacement part. It's a locked door, a sealed system, a question with no public answer. And that's where the first problem appears. Bugatti won't supply the parts. Not easily, not freely, not like any normal manufacturer would. Some components are refused outright. Others come with delays so extreme they may as well not exist. And a few come with price tags that make even experienced builders stop and rethink the entire project. Headlights costing more than supercars. Body panels priced like real estate. Electronics coded so tightly into the vehicle's identity that replacing them becomes less like repair and more like negotiation with a locked system. So the team is forced into a reality most people never see. If they can't buy the parts, they'll have to recreate them. And that changes everything. Because rebuilding a Bugatti is no longer about mechanics. It becomes engineering. Reverse engineering. Problem solving at a level where failure isn't inconvenient. It's expected. The stripped Chiron begins to reveal its structure slowly. Carbon tub intact, but stressed. Suspension components bent beyond safe reuse. Cooling systems fractured in places that suggest impact force far beyond what the body initially shows. It's always like that with hypercars. The visible damage is never the real damage. The real damage is hidden inside systems that were designed under aerospace-level precision. Systems that assume one thing: they will never be repaired outside their birthplace. And yet, here they are, trying anyway. As parts are removed, the conversation shifts. Not just about how to fix it, but whether it should be fixed this way at all. Because there's another option that keeps coming up. Send it back. Let the manufacturer rebuild it. Let the factory restore it to perfection. Let it return as if nothing ever happened. But that option comes with its own cost. Time. Control. Identity. Because once it leaves the hands of the builders here, it stops being a challenge and becomes just another restored hypercar. And that's not what this is anymore. This has already become something else. A test. A statement. A question being asked in real time. Can modern hypercars be rebuilt outside the system that created them? As the chassis is examined further, the scale of the challenge becomes clearer. Even simple tasks aren't simple. A single bolt isn't just a bolt. It's torque-calibrated, heat-treated, registered in a system that expects it to be installed in a specific environment under controlled conditions. Every piece is part of a larger digital identity. Remove one thing incorrectly, and the entire system begins to reject the rebuild. But the team keeps going. Slowly, carefully, measuring everything twice because there is no room for guessing at this level. The engine becomes the next focus. A machine that, in its untouched form, produces power that feels almost unreal. A twin-turbocharged V16 ecosystem designed to accelerate a car faster than most aircraft feel comfortable with. Now it sits exposed, silent, damaged, and yet still valuable beyond comprehension. The inspection reveals what everyone feared. Internal stress indicators, cooling failure traces, possible contamination from impact shock. Nothing that screams total destruction, but everything that screams risk. And risk in a Bugatti is expensive, very expensive. The conversation turns again. Do they rebuild the engine fully? Do they attempt partial restoration? Or do they fabricate hybrid solutions where new meets salvage? Every answer carries consequences, because there is no instruction manual for this scenario. There is only experience, intuition, and willingness to accept that mistakes here are not cheap lessons. They are catastrophic ones. Days pass in compressed fragments, parts laid out across benches like surgical tools, wiring harnesses carefully labeled and traced like veins in a body being studied for revival, carbon panels being inspected under light to determine whether they can survive reuse or need complete replacement. And through it all, the same realization keeps returning. This isn't a repair job. It's reconstruction, a rebirth built on uncertainty. And then comes a breakthrough, a decision. Not everything will be replaced. Not everything will be sourced from factory supply chains. Instead, the team commits to a hybrid rebuild philosophy. Factory parts where possible, fabricated components where necessary, and custom engineering wherever the system refuses to cooperate. It's a dangerous path, because once you break factory integrity on a hypercar like this, you are no longer restoring it. You are reinventing it. The chassis becomes a foundation of that reinvention, reinforced where needed, royal-lined to millimeter precision. Every mounting point verified against original geometry, because even the slightest deviation at this level will transform high-speed stability into unpredictability. Suspension components are next. Bent arms replaced. Carbon structures inspected. Geometry recalibrated again and again until everything returns to something resembling balance. But even then, nothing is guaranteed, because no amount of workshop precision can fully replicate factory environment calibration. Still, they continue, because stopping now would mean admitting something nobody wants to say out loud, that some cars are not meant to come back. Then comes wiring, the invisible nightmare of modern hypercars. Thousands of signals, modules communicating across encrypted networks, systems that talk to each other constantly, checking authenticity, alignment, condition. One wrong signal, and the car refuses to start. So every connection becomes a negotiation, every module a question mark. And slowly, piece by piece, the system begins to wake again. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to suggest something incredible. It might actually run again. And that changes the atmosphere in the workshop completely, because now it's no longer theory. It's possible, but possibility is not victory. Not yet. There's still the moment that defines every rebuild like this. The first start, the ignition of a machine that should not, by all logic, return to life after what it has been through. Everyone knows it's coming. No one knows what will happen when it does. The key turns. Systems initialize. A series of clicks, waves, and electronic confirmations ripple through the car like a nervous system reawakening. For a moment, nothing. Then a response. Not perfect, not clean, but alive. A rough idle breaks through the silence like a reminder that engineering can sometimes defy expectation. It's unstable, it's uncertain, but it's real. And in that moment, everything shifts. Because the project is no longer about rebuilding a wrecked Bugatti. It's about proving that even something engineered at the highest level in the world can be understood, dismantled, and brought back without the original creators holding the blueprint. The Chiron sits there, idling unevenly, as if it doesn't fully trust its own return. And maybe it shouldn't, because what comes next is refinement, testing, correction. The long process of turning it runs into it works. But that's a problem for another day. For now, it lives. And that alone changes everything. Outside the workshop, Miami carries on like nothing happened. Traffic, noise, normal life continuing in parallel to something extraordinary being rebuilt just behind closed doors. But inside, something rare has happened. A wrecked hypercar refused to stay broken. And the people who decided to rebuild it are now standing in the middle of a challenge bigger than they first imagined. Not because it's impossible, but because it was never supposed to be attempted this way. The Chiron breathes again, not as it was, but as something rebuilt through risk, uncertainty, and pure mechanical defiance. And as the engine settles into its unstable rhythm, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't the end of the rebuild. It's only the beginning of whether it can truly survive it. They didn't expect it to go this far. A wrecked Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport sitting in an auction yard should have been the end of the story. A financial loss, a write-off, a reminder that even the most expensive machines in the world can be reduced to silence in a single moment. But that's not what happened, because instead of disappearing into insurance paperwork and corporate recovery systems, the car came back to the original owner, back into the hands of the man who already lost it once. And somehow, back into a workshop where people are now looking at one of the most complex hypercars ever built and saying the words nobody should say casually: "We can fix it." 2 months earlier, this whole idea didn't even feel real. There were 2 cars on the table. One was a Ford GT sitting in Dubai, a rare machine, still repairable, still understandable, still within reach of normal engineering logic. The other was something completely different. A Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport in Miami that had already been through its worst day. And when the team first got close enough to see it properly, the reality hit fast. This wasn't just damage. This was system failure on every level. Carbon structure, electronics, sensors, drivetrain components, all compromised. And then came the part that changed everything. Bugatti themselves. Because the moment they checked the chassis number and tried to source parts, the answer came back like a locked door. No components supplied through normal channels. No dealership support. No easy repair path. Just silence and restriction tied directly to the identity of the vehicle. And that changed the entire equation. A Ford GT suddenly looked logical, repairable, predictable. But the Bugatti, it looked impossible. And yet, that impossibility is exactly what pulled them back in. Because the real problem wasn't just the damage. It was the cost of being wrong. Headlights priced like supercars on their own. Body panels that cost more than most houses. A bonnet that could wipe out an entire budget in one line item. Even before labor, even before engineering, even before the unknowns, the numbers were already absurd. And still, the car sold. The auction didn't slow down. It escalated from millions to more millions until finally it landed in a space that didn't make sense to most people watching it. But the most shocking part wasn't the price. It was who bought it back. The original owner, a man who had already lived through the crash, already been paid out, already let go of the car, now deciding to reclaim it. Not because it made financial sense, but because something about it still mattered. A connection, a memory, a machine that represented more than metal and carbon. And then came the unexpected message. He didn't just want it back. He wanted it fixed. In Miami. Not at Bugatti, not in France, not under factory control, but in a workshop with a group of engineers and builders willing to take on something even the manufacturer was hesitant to fully support outside their system. And just like that, the challenge became real. Not theoretical, not content speculation. Real. The first arrival in Miami didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like standing in front of something wounded but still dangerous. The Bugatti was there, sitting low, wide, quiet, but not dead, because even damaged, it still spoke the language of a hypercar. The kind of car that doesn't feel like it belongs in a normal workshop. The kind of machine that changes the air around it. And when they opened it up for the first inspection, the list started growing immediately. Cooling issues, electrical faults, airbag systems triggered, transmission errors stacking one after another like warnings from a machine trying to protect itself after trauma. Low coolant warnings suggested internal leaks. Misfires hinted at deeper engine disturbance. And underneath all of it was a bigger question nobody wanted to answer too quickly. What actually happened at impact? Because damage like this doesn't stay isolated. It spreads through wiring, through modules, through systems that were never designed to be partially broken. Then came the physical reality. Radiators compromised, fluid loss, electrical instability. And yet somehow, still alive enough to start, still running, still moving under its own power, even if barely. That alone changed the tone in the room. Because a dead hypercar is one thing, A wounded one that still wants to run is something else entirely. Getting it onto the trailer felt less like loading a car and more like handling a fragile experiment. Every movement mattered. Every angle carried risk. And as it rolled away from its resting place, it wasn't leaving its past behind. It was bringing it with it. At the workshop, the atmosphere shifted again. This wasn't just repair work anymore. This was problem solving at the highest level of automotive engineering without manufacturer backup. And the first question was simple. Can we even read it? Because modern hypercars are not mechanical puzzles anymore. They are networks. Systems talking to systems. And if the diagnostic tools can't communicate, the entire project collapses before it begins. The scanner connected. A moment of tension. Then response. It worked. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. But enough. Enough to see the chaos inside the machine. Enough to confirm that the Bugatti was still speaking, even if it was screaming through error codes. That was the turning point. Because once a car like this can communicate, it can be understood. And once it can be understood, it can be rebuilt. But understanding doesn't make it easy. The deeper they went, the more complex it became. Modules weren't just failing, they were cascading. One error triggering another. Systems shutting down in protection mode. Electrical architecture behaving like it had been shaken awake and never properly reset. And then came the reality of parts. Even if everything was diagnosed perfectly, even if every issue was mapped, even if every solution was clear on paper, getting the physical components was another story entirely. Bugatti's position wasn't just about cost. It was about control. Some components tied to chassis identity were not simply sold over the counter. Some were restricted. Some were designed to return to the factory ecosystem. And that meant every missing piece became a negotiation between engineering ambition and corporate boundaries. In other words, the rebuild wasn't just technical. It was political. Inside the workshop, that reality created a strange energy. Because on one side, there was confidence, experience, mechanical instinct. On the other, there was a manufacturer capable of slowing or even blocking progress. But instead of stopping the project, it sharpened it. Every decision now had to account for uncertainty. Every repair plan had to include backup strategies. If one path failed, another had to exist immediately. There was no room for dependence, only adaptation. As the days progressed, the Bugatti started to transform from a damaged hypercar into a full forensic project. Every panel removal revealed new layers of complexity. Every inspection exposed design decisions that made sense only at factory-level precision. And yet, underneath all of it, the core structure remained astonishing. Even broken, it was still a Bugatti, still engineered for extreme speed, still built with a level of precision most workshops never touch. And that made the challenge even more intense. Because now it wasn't about whether it could be repaired. It was about whether it could be repaired correctly, back to factory standard, without factory guidance. That distinction changed everything. At one point, the conversation shifted to value, not emotional value, market value, because a similar untouched Chiron would sit at nearly $6 million. But this one, even after repair, carried history, a salvage title, a documented crash, a story embedded into its identity forever. Some would see that as damage. Others would see it as proof of survival. And somewhere in the middle was the real truth. This wasn't just a restoration. It was a resurrection attempt on a machine designed to be nearly untouchable. As work continued, more truth surfaced. The insurance claim had already reset the car's legal status. The ownership history was now part of a public record. Every detail could be traced, analyzed, questioned. Nothing about it was hidden anymore. And yet, ironically, the car itself still held mysteries. Because no matter how many scans were run or how many systems were checked, there were still unknowns that only full disassembly could reveal. At moments, frustration crept in. Not because the work was impossible, but because it was unpredictable. And unpredictability is the one thing engineering teams try hardest to eliminate. But hey, it was the entire foundation of the project. Still, progress continued. Slowly, carefully, methodically, and with every step, the Bugatti started to shift again. Not physically yet, but conceptually. From wreck, to project, to challenge, to something closer to a proving ground. A test of whether modern hypercars are truly repairable outside their controlled environments, and whether passion and engineering instinct can compete with factory systems designed to centralize control. As the team looked over the car in the workshop lights, there was a moment of silence. Not uncertainty, not doubt, recognition, because everyone in that room understood the same thing, without needing to say it out loud. This wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about stepping into territory most people never even attempt to enter, and whatever happened next would either become one of the most remarkable rebuilds ever documented, or a reminder why manufacturers guard a machine so tightly in the first place. Either way, the Bugatti Chiron sat there in the center of the workshop, silent, damaged, but not finished. The idea sounds simple on paper. Take a wrecked hypercar, rebuild it, and bring it back to life. But nothing about this Bugatti Chiron project is simple. From the moment the car was damaged, it stopped being just a machine and became a legal, financial, and engineering battlefield that most people would never dare step into. 2 months ago, everything started with curiosity. A Ford GT in Dubai, a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport in Miami. 2 hypercars, 2 completely different futures. At first, the Ford GT looked like the safer path. Parts were available, repairs were possible, a controlled project. But the Bugatti was something else entirely, because very quickly, one truth changed everything. Bugatti doesn't just repair cars like normal manufacturers. They control them. And in this case, they didn't want to sell parts for that specific chassis at all, not even through official channels. That meant one thing. If this project went ahead, it would not be a rebuild supported by the manufacturer. It would be a rebuild done in defiance of the system that created the car. And then the numbers arrived.